Not sure what's up with YouTube this morning, but it won't go live. I want to talk about perspective this morning. I don't think we'll be very long on this Mother's Day. But back when I was in working in education full time, I probably like 2010-ish, they started coming out with these videos to engage teachers and administrators and educational folks about the reality of the world we live in. And they were called Did You Know? And every year they would update some of the stats and some of the graphics and stuff. But they were just like 5 or 8 minute long videos that just told statistics about the world today. And given that, one of my favorite statistics is 90% of all statistics are wrong, which I could see is plausible. But this one was from 2021, so last year. So it might be a little bit dated. Numbers might be a little more askew than that 90% statistic. But this is just, and a lot of these videos are, they're concentric around technology and people in the world today and using technology, which has been the push in education for a while. So I just want to maybe perhaps bore you or wow you or awe you with my inner geek here for a minute. Over 4.7 billion people are on the internet today. 35 billion devices are connected to the internet. 35 billion. 3.8 billion people own a smartphone. That's half the world. Over 400 new websites are created every minute. There are 7 billion Google searches per day. I think I contribute a lot to that. Every minute, 500 hours of video is uploaded to YouTube. Gavin said it's working now, so we're contributing to that 500 hours every minute right at this moment. Fortnite. My kids know what Fortnite is. It's a free game to play online. It has 350 million players. Free game. Makes $2 billion a year in revenue. Free game. 100 billion digital messages are sent every day. Facebook has more than 2.7 billion users. If it were a country, it would by far be the largest country in the world. 90% of the world's data has been created in just the past couple of years. In 2013, Amazon had 1,000 robots operating in its warehouses. Now it has 200,000 in 175 warehouses. The amount of digital and technical information doubles each year. What that means for someone studying in a 4-year technical degree, half of what they learn their first year is outdated by their 3rd year. We're currently educating kids for jobs that don't exist, who will use technologies that aren't invented yet in order to solve problems that we don't even know will be problems as of now. There are 203 million hours of video watched each day on Netflix. 203 million hours every day. 56 million hours of music are streamed on Spotify. I think it's 3.9 million hours spent playing Fortnite every year, or every day, Gavin. This is the first time in history where you have 5 generations working side by side who all grew up communicating very differently. So I didn't even know this was a demographic before the baby boomer generation was the traditionalist. And they say, can you write me? Send me a letter. Then we had the boomers. Can you give me a call? And Gen X, I identify as a Gen X. I'm right on that line. Some groups lump me in a millennial. I'll stay out of that group. That Gen X says email me. I could dig that. I get that. Millennials say text me. And Gen Z says, let's have a video chat. More than 140 million people will be born this year. In 6 minutes, 40 babies will be born in the United States. 204 will be born in China, and 307 in India. By 2050, the world is expected to have 9.7 billion people. I remember when I was Trent's age, the number was not quite 6. So in 55, 60 years, 9.7. We're going to increase by over 50%. 25% of the population in China and 28% in India, respectively, with the highest IQ. So 25% of people in China with the highest IQ are greater than the population of North America. So the top 25% in China number more than Mexico, Canada, and the United States combined. What that means is that in these countries, respectively, there are more honors kids than there are kids in our respective countries in North America. If you're 1 in a million in India, there'll be 1,380 people just like you. And in China, if you're 1 in a million, there'll be 1,439 people just like you. So these videos were meant to spark the wow factor, right? Like, this is the world we're living in. This is the rules by which we play by now. This is the way in which people engage and communicate and function. And it's changing ever so rapidly. And what I think a lot of people fail is to understand perspective. And I want to just take a quick dive in this morning as to what's the difference between perspective and perception and reality. I always would run around saying perception is reality. And the more I think about it, that's not true. You know, it might be my reality, but it's not the reality. So perspective is a viewpoint from which you see things. I had a board member that I used to work for. He was on the Buildings and Grounds Committee, so we would meet all the time, a couple times a month. And he would always say, Matt, I approach things, I look at things from 30,000 feet. And when he would say that every so often, I would nudge the guy next to me and I say, hey, I think my man's altimeter is broken. Because sometimes he's not at 30,000 feet, he's clipping the treetops. He's taking out a couple branches along the way. So his perspective was not reality. He was quite the micromanager. But perception is the way you interpret the things you view from your perspective. Is perception reality? I don't believe it actually is. It might be your reality, but perhaps not the real one. When our offices as tech folks at Canon-Mac were at the high school, once or twice a year, the dean would come and say, hey, Matt, I need a couple guys. We got to go do our thing in psychology class. And it was one of the very, very limited times we actually had interaction with the kids. And we just never did that. He would always just give us this little skit, this little 60-second drama. And we got to be actors. And we would go kind of interrupt this guy's class with a new computer or something to get fixed, and there'd be 3 of us. And we would start an argument. Sometimes one of us would push the other one. So we'd be yelling, and the teacher would be like, what are you guys doing? Get out of here. I got a class to teach. And then as soon as the door would shut, the teacher would say, get out your pencils and paper and write down what you saw. What color shirt did the tall guy have on? What color was his hair? Who said what first? Who pushed who? And went down all these lists of questions, and then we came back in the room. And my Lord, they were all over the board. In a mere seconds, well, he had a red shirt. When we walked back in, he had a blue shirt on, you know. And the thing he was trying to teach a class was, you know, when the police, you know, come to investigate an incident or something like that, you can't take everyone's version of the story as the cold hard facts, because people see things so differently. Even in 60 seconds time and writing down the details immediately thereafter, most of them got it wrong. The finite details. Those were always fun. But I believe your perspective and your perception determines different things. It determines your thoughts. In Colossians 3, 1 through 4, if then you have been raised with Christ, seek things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is in your life, appears, then you also appear with him in glory. So think on things that are above, not here on earth. And that's kind of what I want to ultimately challenge everyone with this morning is approach things from a heavenly perspective. That might be our perception, and that heaven, which is the true reality, would then be our reality. But perspective and perception also determines your appetite. In Matthew 13:44, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in the field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all he has and then buys that field. I kind of relate to that, dude. I have an appetite for all things business, and I know a lot of people who wouldn't be that guy, though. I know a lot of people whose perspective, that's a lot of work. I don't know that I'm cut out for that. I don't know that I want to gamble everything I have and risk everything I have to buy a field. Well, what if someone went out and dug that up? You know, I think a lot of times we get in our own ways and we miss opportunities because our perspective is that of fear or doubt. Philippians 4, 1 through 13, not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned that whatever situation I am to be content. I know how to be brought low, I know how to abound, and in every circumstance I have learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I appreciate Paul. You know, he rode the high road and he got drugged down the low road so many times. But his perspective was always that of heaven, right? He was always in pursuit of glorifying God. No matter what situation I find myself in, I'm content. And then Philippians 3, 13 and 14. Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies beyond and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of Jesus Christ, God, Jesus in Christ Jesus. Press toward the mark, toward the finish line, toward the goal. Like the guy who bought the field, sold everything he has. He had a goal. He had a finish line. There was an end game. I was thinking this morning of Elisha. And in 2 Kings 6, 8 through 20, now the king of Aram was at war with Israel. After conferring with his officers, he said, I will set up my camp in such a place. The man of God sent word to the king of Israel, beware of passing that place because the Arameans are going down there. So the king of Israel checked on that place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he was on his guard in such places. This enraged the king of Aram. He summoned his officers and demanded of them, will you not tell me which of us is on the side of the king of Israel? None of us, my lord, the king, said one of his officers. But Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom. Go find out where he is, the king ordered, so I could send men and capture him. The report came back, he is in Dothan. He sent his horses and chariots and a strong force there. They went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, the army with the horses and chariots surrounded the city. Oh, my Lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elijah prayed, O Lord, open his eyes so that he might see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire around Elisha. Then the enemy came down toward him. Elijah prayed to the Lord, struck these people with blindness. So he struck them with blindness, and Elisha asked, as Elisha had asked. Elisha told them, this is not the road, and this is not the city. Follow me, and I'll lead you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Samaria. And they entered the city, and Elisha said, Lord, open these eyes so that these men could see. And the Lord opened their eyes, and they looked, and they were inside Samaria. So Elisha says, there's more with me than against me. He had a different perspective than his servant. The one who was looking out the front gate and said, well, there's all these horses and chariots, and that was an earthly perspective. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes. And God gave him the heavenly perspective. God gave him the reality. And I think it's just comical from there. Elisha prays, hey, make all these folks blind, let them all the way out of the country, open their eyes back up, and they had no idea where they were. So your perspective will determine your actions too. So I think Elisha, if he didn't have that heavenly perspective, he would have operated out of fear. He wouldn't have had the confidence that a heavenly perspective gave him to have a little fun with these guys and drag them out of the country. I don't know if you all saw the news this week or last week about the Supreme Court leak. Last time I was up here in front of you all in this forum, I mentioned that very court case, right? Because I was there in D.C. on the day that the Supreme Court, their session this year opened. So the federal government runs from October to end of September, right? That's their fiscal year. So I think it was the 3rd of October was opening session for the Supreme Court. And it was Amy Coney Barrett's first full term, right? This is her first full session that we're in right now. So they had a little First Amendment protest scheduled that we all went to, and out came the pro-choicers and the witches and all those folks that caused a ruckus, and many of whom got arrested and got a front row seat to all that. And and talking about this court case with some friends, and I think that the church is in a good position right now to do some real good, but it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. I remember a guy saying that, a preacher man say, he was protesting in front of an abortion clinic many, many years ago. And this young lady went in to the clinic, and he's praying for her, don't let her get an abortion. And she came out, and she got in this guy's face and shoved this pink paper in his chest. And that paper meant that she was going on for other medical care. She didn't get the abortion. And what she said was so poignant. She said, here you go, preacher man. I didn't get an abortion. What are you going to do for me now? That's reality. That's a perspective that the church has missed in the past 50 years. That's why this thing has drug on for 50 years. Because that's reality, and we don't get it. We just don't get it. The church as a whole in America, we don't get it. This thing isn't going to go down without a fight. Satan has enjoyed the blood of all those babies for 50 some years. He's not going to go down without a fight. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be hard. And like the man who sold everything he has and bought the field, that had to be a painful process. That had to be a scary process. He sold everything. I couldn't imagine. We've taken some risks. I couldn't imagine selling everything I had. That's quite a gamble. But the reward is great. And until we capture reality in this situation, until we see what the true reward is and the effort that it takes to get that reward, until we understand that and understand that it's so worth it, we've got a long way to go. It's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy. But the church has to rise up. I remember being in D.C. more recently than not with my family. We went to the National Harbor, which is in Maryland. And it's a beautiful place, shopping and dining and entertainment. And down right on the water, the river's really big there. Big ships come and go, and down on the Potomac. And there's a little sandbox kind of playing thing there. And if you search, just do one of those 7 billion Google searches a day. If you Google search The Awakening at the National Harbor, you'll see this artwork installment in this huge sandbox. It's bigger than this building. And it's this statue of a guy climbing up out of the sand. So his foot's over there, and his arms are over here, and his head's over there. He's ginormous. He would probably, if we stood him on his feet, he'd probably be 60, 70 feet tall. And it's like he's waking up, this big bearded man. He's waking up and crawling up out of the sand, climbing up out of the sand. And I think that's, something that the church needs to grab a hold of. Is like, we've had our head in the sand way too long. We've let the world's reality, the world's perspective taint our view, squelch our mission for way too long. It's time to wake up. Your perspective will also determine what fruit you produce. I was looking into Jacob and the story of his spotted and speckled sheep. When his father-in-law, Laban, the shyster he was for 14 years, over and over again, taking advantage of him. And Jacob took the sticks, in Genesis 30, then Jacob took fresh sticks of poplar, almond, and plane trees, and peeled white streaks in them, exposing the whites of the sticks. And he set the sticks that he had and peeled it in front of the flocks and the troughs, and that is the watering places where the flocks came to drink. And since they bred when they came to drink, the flocks bred in front of these sticks, so that the flocks brought forth striped, speckled, and spotted. And Jacob separated the lambs, and he set the faces of the flocks toward the striped and all the black in the flock of Laban. He put down droves apart and did not put them with Laban's flock. Whenever the stronger of the flock were breeding, Jacob would lay the sticks in the troughs before the eyes of the flock, and that they might breed among the sticks. But for the feebler of the flock, he would not lay them there. So the feebler would be Laban's, and the stronger would be Jacob's. I dove into some scientific research on this because we have sheep, and we have a Suffolk ram. They're the black ones, very, very black. And we have some Dorset and Cheviot, which are very, very white. And we just let them run amok and do their own thing, and we get speckled and spotted sheep sometimes. I think the white Dorset, he's a big boy with horns. He's a really, really cool looking ram. I think he had the run of the mill this year because we didn't get a lot of speckled and spotted this year. I think the Suffolk is getting old, and sometimes you'll see them battling out in the field. They'll literally charge each other over and over. You can try and get in between them, and they'll ignore you, and they're bucking heads, trying to assert dominance. It's pretty wild to see. But like, I understand the genetics. You put a black sheep with a white sheep, and they come out black and white. It doesn't work like you mix black and white and you get gray. You don't get gray sheep. You get speckled and spotted. And so the little bit of research I was doing last night and this morning is that scientists deemed that it wasn't so much about the sight picture of striped sticks, but all those genes appear in sheep, in any animal of fur, as recessive or dominant, so that in each cell. which is why they come out speckled and spotted and striped. It's not like they're all solid one color. That's what makes the most sense to me. You mix black and white, you get gray. Well, what the mother consumes while she's rearing that baby lamb turns those dominant and recessive genes on and off. And scientists have deemed that these particular trees stuck in the watering troughs that the mothers were drinking are the nutrients that those sheep needed to turn these genes on and off and make speckled and spotted sheep. It wasn't so much what they were consuming with their eyes is probably the most common thought behind this. It was what they were actually drinking. The sap from these trees were the nutrients that they needed to make baby lambs that have speckled and spots in their fur. Crazy, isn't it? So the perspective is what they consumed, which deemed the fruit that they produced. Jacob's grandparents, Abraham and Sarah, employed their perspective, their worldly perspective, on God's promise and birth in Ishmael, right? When they finally employed heaven's perspective, they got Isaac. And those two perspectives have been battling each other ever since. I have pretty strong opinions about the 2020 election. I'm going to go off on a tangent on that for a second here. I firmly believe Trump was God's choice to be the president in 2020. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I don't have time to chase those rabbit holes. If they are true, not true, there's nothing I could do about it anyway. And I just choose not to. As a family, I preach to my kids, we don't do drama. I consider a lot of that conspiracy theory stuff just dramatic. Because there's no remedy at the end of the day. There's nothing that all that research, all that rabbit hole chasing I would do would ever prove to be anything. But this is my thought, my 30,000 foot perspective on what happened. I saw it firsthand, the attitude of Trump. Like, I believe he'll go down in history as the most pro-life president ever. We're experiencing the fallout of that right now in a great way with this Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health in the Supreme Court. If it weren't for him, that would not be a thing right now. But my man has the most rotten attitude. He's just arrogant and miserable. And I was on a pheasant hunt trip about a month ago or so up in the Catskills in New York. And it was with a manufacturer's rep that we use in our business. And they put this hunt on, and I'm like, yeah, sure, sounds like fun. So we went. They're all Jersey and New York City boys, Italians. So get that in your mind, right? They are the most cruel, vile, everything you could imagine nasty coming out of someone's mouth came out of someone's mouth that weekend. And some of it was endearing, like they just understand that that's who they are about each other and they didn't really mean it in a derogatory way. They're just in jest. But that is that culture. That's the culture that Trump come out of, right? That's the culture he knew. That's the culture he thrived in. Like those boys that do that work in New York City, they know that city. You know, that's who we were hanging out with. They know that city, and that's how they have to function in their minds to play in that city. And that's, so, you know, put Trump in that box, that's who he is. But what I saw and where I think that things went awry is I saw the church not buy into the good politics, the good philosophies that Trump was putting out. I saw him buy into the attitude. I saw the church buy into the arrogance. I could show you Facebook post after Facebook post of respected preachers and ministers that I love and cherish that weren't about the political rhetoric, the pro-life rhetoric. They were about the arrogance and the attitude. And I firmly believe we messed it up as a church in this country. How in the world do we think God would ever honor that? That's my opinion. I saw it so many times that just people latched onto that arrogance. And instead of being, I cherish humility. I love humility as a characteristic trait. If I ever have the opportunity to interview someone and I see that as a trait, I latch onto that. Like, yeah, I want you. I just interviewed a kid who's going to the Air Force at an escape room we just bought in Youngstown. And he's going to the Air Force this summer. He was super confident, but not cocky. He was just chill, relaxed, and he had great answers. He wasn't nervous. And I'm like, hey, kid, how many interviews have you been on? He's like, 4. I'm like, he's like 18, not 17. He's like you're one of the most enjoyable interviews I've ever had because he had humility, but he was confident. So you could have both. You can have both. I saw it just this week. Your perspective will determine your destiny and your destination. You know, Jeremiah 29:11, we all know, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for good and not evil, to give you a hope and a future. That's heaven's perspective. That's heaven's reality. And it's up to us to pick. We're going to choose the perspective that we see here on earth or the one that God has pre-prescribed for us in heaven. I like Joseph and the story of his journey. He had a dream at the age of 17, and I think he was one of those arrogant 17-year-old kids. Hey, I'm daddy's favorite, and you're all going to bow down to me. So he gets thrown in a pit and sold into slavery. And then he finds his way into Potiphar's house where he's in charge of everything going on there. Then Potiphar's wife has him thrown in prison. So that's about 19 years of age. He did the honorable thing, but he suffered a consequence. And then he interprets dreams for the cupbearer and the baker about 9 years later. So he's in prison for 9 years. Then he gets forgotten about for 2 more years. And then he gets remembered and he interprets Joseph's dream. So by this time, he's about 30 years old now. So he's spent almost half his life in prison or in slavery. Then he's put in second in command for 7 years of plenty. Then famine hits. And it's 2 more years before Joseph's brothers finally come to Egypt and say, hey, we need some food. So he's about 39 years old. So about 20 years after he gets thrown into a pit, it took for Joseph's dream to become reality. And I'm sure his perception of that dream, his perspective on that dream changed over the years. From that 17-year-old arrogant kid, hey, I'm Papa's favorite, and you're all going to bow down to me, to this all happened to save my family. It took 20 years, but he made it there. You know, I could say a lot of things that Missy and I get ourselves into are akin to that in business. You know, we bought an escape room in Washington back in, when was that, 2019? And we didn't know what we were doing. We knew the concept. We understood, you know, what they were. We've never built an escape game before, you know, and we didn't sell everything we had, but we took a risk, a big one. And we learned how to make games, and we learned how to treat customers. And one of the biggest lessons I learned in that was learning how to trust God for people to walk through the front door to pay the bills. You know, we signed a lease for one in Somerset a few years later. And as I signed the lease, I looked at Missy and I said, there went $50,000. And a couple other people that were with us kind of rolled their eyes like, what do you mean? $2,000 a month for 20 years, or 2 years, that's $50,000. That's an obligation. That's debt on the books that we owe for this lease. I'm like, wow, it's a risk. It's scary. We got 4 of them now, so I don't even want to think about what that liability looks like. But it's not small. It's not a small thing. But that was the first thing I think we had to overcome was relying on the public who we don't know. It's not friends and family by and large that show up to play our escape games. It's people that are unknown. We're relying on them to walk through the door week in and week out and pay our bills and hopefully turn a profit, right? So then in the middle of COVID, we found one that went up for sale in Akron, Ohio. And we bought it. We come to terms on a deal. And by this time, we're kind of learning how to negotiate these sales agreements and strike these deals and make it worth our while and as risk-free as possible and make the transition as smooth as possible. We just did another one. Last Sunday was a week ago. We got this one in Youngstown. But it was the first time in August of 2020 that we were not only relying on people to walk through the door, but we took another leap of faith, and we were relying on employees to run the business for us, to engage with customers and show up on time and be us, our hands and feet, 2.25 hours away where we weren't be. It was a new perspective for us, right? It was a new style of doing business, a new way of doing business. It was the first time ever that I was hands off. I'm always in the thick of everything we got going on. It was the first time I had to cut the cord and say, you know what, I'm going to turn this over to someone else. Then we started one in Somerset, and it was the same thing. We're relying on people to walk through the door. We have a crazy lease to pay, and we're relying on employees to take care of business for us. We do administrative stuff. We manage things remotely, but we're relying on them to be our hands and feet. And it got so crazy, so busy with everything that we got going on that we converted our local one to that. We don't go run sessions anymore. We've walked away from that. And we've created a model and created a level of comfort for ourselves that was absent the norm. It wasn't the perspective. It wasn't the perception we had before, but it's become a reality for us where sometimes I'll just pull out my phone and say, there's like 15 or 20 sessions today. I'm going to see like 100 people or 150 people today, through all the escape rooms. And I don't even oftentimes pay attention to that. It's become a new reality for us where I was just saying to my uncle who's working with us now that we've got we'll have upwards of 30 employees, right? By the time we get this last one up and running. And I'm thinking, look at all those lives we get to touch. Look at, not because our reality is we have to be there. We have to be in the thick of it. We have to be the one running it. We cut it loose and engage other people, and those other people can now make a living and have some extra spending cash or help pay their bills. And we're able to bless people because we took a risk and we forgone what is the typical perspective for people and took a leap. When I left my job at the school, I was making a pretty healthy salary, very healthy. And as anyone knows, anyone in public service, public government or whatever, the benefits are pretty kick butt. Full family medical health, dental, vision, retirement, it is crazy good. And I literally sold that as if it were everything I had, literally, and bought the field. And it has been an incredible year and a half. The perception that so many people have, why would you give that up? Why would you give that salary up? Why would you give that retirement up? I look at guys like Trump as the businessman, when he was doing his first season of The Apprentice back in early 2000s, or Joe Hardy, the owner of Nemacolin and 84 Lumber, or Jack Pyatt, who is within the past year, I think passed in his 90s, I believe, who owns a lot of downtown Pittsburgh and dang near all of South Point and Canonsburg. These guys are all working into their 80s and 90s, and they're not working hard, but they're actively engaged in business. They're not worried about their retirement fund. Why should I be? That's what's keeping those guys young. That's my plan for health moving forward right there. Stay active and engaged, and that's I think that's heaven's perspective for my life. It's not worrying about what's my 401k doing or my IRA. No. It's a different perspective for us, and it's not the norm. Missy and I definitely are not the norm. We do things a lot differently than most, and we meet a lot of resistance because of that. Oftentimes, we're battling people's perspective of, family and friends. Like, why would you do that? And it's a hard thing to trudge through. Not too many people say, "Oh man, I'm proud of you. Good job." No, it's why would you do that? Are you nuts? Are you crazy? And sometimes it's a hard thing to overcome, but so it goes. The abortion fight in this country is going to be a hard fight to fight, but so it goes. It's worth it. So how do we model a heavenly perspective? I think we need to pay attention to the environment we find ourselves in, or even sometimes put ourselves in. Which news station do we listen to? What is the news? Is it fact or opinion? Is there even a trustworthy source available? When the Russians invaded Ukraine, I found myself watching a conservative news channel pretty regularly, just trying to see what was going on. And I'm blown away by the lack of news and the preponderance of opinion. Whether I agree with the opinion or not, it doesn't matter. I'm there to find fact, and I'm not finding the fact. And I don't know that a real trustworthy news source is available, where you simply get the facts. I know guys who have put themselves on a news fast and have been doing it for probably 4 or 5 years now. Enough is enough. Like, I don't need to listen to this garbage anymore. This conspiracy, this opinion. Like, I really struggle with finding a good place to learn what's really going on in the world around me. What company do we keep? This is a good one for the kids. What company do we keep? They folks who are gonna tend to be dramatic and weigh us down. They're gonna be Job's friends and tell you to curse God and die. Or are they gonna lift you up because they have a heaven's perspective? I think we need to have a hunger for knowing what's truly real instead of making assumptions and relying on others to inform us. Not just making an assumption that, yeah, they said it. It's on a billboard, or it's, Abraham Lincoln said it. You found it on the internet. It must be true. We're so gullible. Superstitions and nursery rhymes. I often think, I think when someone sneezes, and what do we all say? God bless you. It's in my gut that that's using the Lord's name in vain. Because do you know where that really came from? You know why that's really a thing? Back in medieval times, when someone sneezed, they thought your soul left your body. And if someone didn't say God bless you or good health to you, and your soul didn't jump back in, the devil could have taken it and you would die. That's where that came from. So when I sneeze and someone says God bless you, I say God bless you back. I don't thank them. Or I hurry up and say excuse me. And if you sneeze around me, don't get offended. I'm not going to say God bless you. It's not going to happen. It's rooted in something that isn't godly at all. Knocking on wood. Yeah. How many of us go run for some wood to knock on? And it's rooted in something that's pagan. They believe there's good and bad spirits in wood, and you have to go awaken them. Or fingers crossed, which is a pagan custom to like pinky swear. Nowadays, oh, good luck. I hope it goes well. Keep them fingers crossed. Well, it's rooted in a pagan custom. Or nursery rhymes. So many nursery rhymes are rooted in such death and destruction and evil. London Bridges was about a plague. Ashes, ashes. A lot of people died. What'd they do with them? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. The original wasn't catching a tiger, and it came out of the slave trade industry. The word wasn't tiger. It's terrible. It's terrible. But we're so ingrained and rooted in tradition that we just make these assumptions that it's all fun and innocent, but it's not reality. So what I found that we need to do, and I want to challenge everyone, is that we really should question and test everything. If it didn't come straight from the mouth of God, even prophetic words, put them to the test. I've had some real humdingers prophesy over me, and I'm like, yeah, they pulled the arrow back. Whew, man, they missed that mark. Way off base. File that one where it belongs. Just because it came from the news channel ordained by God doesn't mean that it's fact. Just don't assume because it came out of a conservative voice or even a preacher. Back to the Trump thing where I think the church got it so wrong. So many times I'm like, I'm not going to follow you anymore. This is terrible. This is ugly. Don't buy into the conspiracy theories. Ask God for discernment. I really believe that that's one of the things that God has blessed me with. I could trust my gut because I know it came from God. And I've seen it proven so many times, time and time again. God's just nudging me that looks good. That looks all right. It's all fun. But something's not right here. And I've seen it blow up a couple of times in a bad way. And then lastly, just like the statue in the National Harbor, the awakening. Pray for an awakening. What that is in my perspective, is heaven's reality showing up here on earth. It's not assumptions about tradition. It's not the opinions of others based on what they see going on here on earth, but heaven's reality. So that's what I want to pray here this morning, is that God would awaken us as a body, as the church at large in the United States and even the world, that Father, we would have an awakening to heaven's reality, that we would have your true perspective. Not down here, can't see the forest for the trees, but give us that heavenly view, that aerial view from up above, that give us a glimpse of what's really going on. Not what our neighbors say, or not what the newscasters say, or not what I find on the internet, not what the preachers on TV say. But Father God, give us heaven's perspective. Give us your reality, that we might know your heart. And with that, Father, take us to task. Show us on the things that break your heart and the things that you want to champion. Take us to task. If it's selling everything we have to go buy a field, if it's helping the women's shelter down the street, if it's helping the young pregnant mom who has no idea how she's going to make it. Father, open our eyes to that reality and take us to task. That we might say, here we are, use us. In Jesus' name, amen.